Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to a new episode. This is a question and answer, a Q&A with me. So this is the first time I've done this in this fashion, but our subscriber, Kapil Dreams, has proposed a question, and it's many questions within a question, so we're going to try to answer everything in the right order, okay? But here's the question. So, Kapil asks, so does the quote lampwork glass or glass lampworked and slowly cooled won't break unless reintroduced into the flame, unquote, thought apply to larger pieces also? And that's like the first part of this question. So basically, in a nutshell, it absolutely does. It's exactly the same whether you're making it small or whether you're making it large, using the technique where you do not necessarily need to immediately anneal something in soft glass on the torch applies to large and small, because you're basically, the technique doesn't change. The technique stays the same. So whether you're working on something like, oh, what do I have here? Like this deer that I made, okay? A little guy, okay? You could get much smaller, like with the mouse that we made. Okay, here's the mouse. This simple mouse is like the first thing that I showed you guys how to make. And here's something a little bit more medium size. But again, these did not necessarily have to be annealed. But if I wanted to, I could put them in a cold annealer and then bring it up to temp and bring it back down to temperature, and I wouldn't have a problem. Then you would probably feel better that any stress that might be in these pieces would be stressed out of the pieces. So, and it does also work on a large scale too. This is exactly the same as working with something that's like this. Okay. Here we go. This is small stuff. This is a part of a very large sculpture that Lucio Bubacco, well-known glass artist, amazing Italian glass master, basically. Here's a piece of one of his larger pieces. Okay, this is going to be a pedestal that all this stuff went on, and these pieces are just amazing, and he doesn't anneal them until later. I am not even close to being at that kind of level, okay? I'm still the small potatoes here. This is amazing stuff, and I'm so grateful that I have this piece of glass to remind me that I'm not the worst, but I'm certainly not the best at what I do. But I try hard to give you, you know, the proper instruction and answers to your questions. Okay, so this is a big difference, okay? So Lucio works with like a 1/2-inch rod that you can buy, and he has, you know, he has this stuff specially made for him. All the people that are out there, all the Italian workers on Murano, they make their own and pull their own rods, or have somebody there do it for them. And, you know, they can even have their own colors made too, because they live on the island. Another person I would look up is Gianni Toso. He is the first person that I took a class with, and I only took the class once, and it was about, you know, pretty much I just wanted to watch him work. That's what it was all about. But we had torch time, and it was all about making heads and things like that, and that is what allowed me to grow into making yeah, I just broke that, man. Oh, well, shit. Okay, so anyway, here's an original that I have, little Gianni Toso head, okay? He has a very distinctive style with his pieces, as you can see, okay? And he's famous for the chess set at the Corning Museum of Art. So from these little heads that Gianni Toso made, I learned over a few years how to make the heads into what I wanted them to be. You don't want to make these because these aren't yours, you know. You want to make this into your own. So whenever you take a class with somebody, you are trying to emulate everything they're doing. It's like you're trying to pretend like you know how it's done. Basically, you're pretending like you know what you're doing at all times in class. You know, you gotta build up that confidence. Anyway, I hope that that answers your question, the first part of the question. And the next question is, or does the strain when cooling break the glass? Okay, the strain is the same, okay? It's like there is no strain in the glass necessarily, or there's a very minimal amount when you're working when you're working like this, okay? When you're working from the hot and you're working out, okay? So you don't have any strain. That's why the glass is able to not break, because you're not reheating it. And that's when this next question comes in. I know they suggest one cools beads in a fiber blanket if you don't have a kiln handy to avoid breakage. Is it due to shape? Trying to understand not having to keep revisiting and reheating until garaged and annealed, and how that might relate to size and shape. Well, basically, shape, I feel like shape has nothing to do with anything. The shape that you're making is whatever shape you're making. It's all about how large, how thick it is, and how much stress you're putting into that glass while you're making it. Just think of it this way. If it's less than half of an inch, you probably be able to get away with fiber frac. Not a problem. Anything larger than that half an inch, I would recommend that you use, if you don't have an annealer, that you use a hot crock pot. Get a crock pot that is just for this purpose. Vermiculite is what you want to use, and you can buy it at any home and garden store, I believe. Ask for vermiculite. It's something that aerates the soil. You mix it with plant soil, basically. But you can also use it as a insulation for your glass beads. So you pour the vermiculite into a hot crock pot, or into a crock pot, and you heat it up, and that becomes like a temporary annealer for you until you can get something larger. But you have to know your heat. And the only way to know your heat is through trial and error. Don't make try not to make too big of a deal out of breaking glass, okay? It can be frustrating. Not everybody does this, and that's why, because it's not easy. If glass making at any level were easy, everybody do it because it's so much fun. They put the hours in, they put the time in, they put the practice in. They take workshops, you know, they go to classes. Some people are self-taught. Somebody had to teach themselves. For me, a lot of my process, I've had to do trial and error and learn myself as well. If any of your beads basically break in hot vermiculite, like when you're done with the beads, let them sit in the hot vermiculite for a while and then just turn it off. And they should be okay the next day. Let everything cool down. But I noticed that once my flat or round beads, thin or thick, it would break even in the vermiculite, and that's getting about 3/4 of an inch, you know, in height or in thickness. Then all of a sudden you're going to have problems, and you really need to invest in an annealer. And my annealer is a chili pepper annealer. Here it is. There it is. There's my annealer, okay? And this is a great annealer. I really, really like it. It was only about $500. It works great. It was worth the budget for me. It was worth it for me because of the work that I'm making now. But then that brings us full circle to, well, you don't really have to anneal things depending on the technique you use. I could go on and on and on. Thanks again, Kapil, and thanks again, everybody, for joining me in the dungeon for this little Q&A segment. And we'll see you next time on another... We'll see you next time. How's that?